Today is the 25th Sunday in ordinary time, and today's readings center around something that has eaten deep into the fabrics of our society: the problem of social injustice, the problem of the exploitation of the poor. Sometimes we may ask ourselves, is the church not just concerned about the spiritual, that it should not have a voice against the social injustice in the society? Of course, the church is concerned about the entire person, the social, the emotional, the spiritual, the wholesome well-being of the person, not just the soul, but the soul and the body are the concern of the church. So in today's reading, from the first reading, the prophecy of Amos, the prophet of social justice, Amos laments against the injustice done to the poor, the exploitation of the poor by the merchants, those who, though carry on with their own religious observances, yet the dignity of the other person means nothing to them. They are only concerned about the profits they make from them. And that is why the prophet laments, when shall the new moon be over? When shall the religious observances be over? So that we can trample on the poor. We can exploit them for our own selfish gain. God sees this. The church is not against profit making in business, but the church is also concerned about the process, the stages towards that profit that we make. We must not exploit the poor, the vulnerable, the less privileged for our own selfish gain. And when we talk about this social injustice, it can be based on color, it can be based on race, it can be based on religion, social status, whatever it is. Unfortunately, this is the society that we find ourselves today, the capitalist society, whereby many think that the end justifies the means. All that matters is the acquisition of wealth. It doesn't matter how we acquire that wealth. Trampling on people. And that is why many people go into all sorts of businesses that destroy the individual person, that destroys humanity, businesses or ventures that don't uphold the dignity of the person created in the image and likeness of God. People mortgage themselves, mortgage their souls, mortgage their consciences because of what they wish to acquire. And today we are being reminded, Amos becomes the voice of conscience, becomes the one who cries out, as the church continues to do, to remind us that the church is concerned about the entire person, and you cannot gain or make profit at the expense of the other person. However, in this regard, whereby the government even makes laws that are against humanity, what do we do? The second reading from the first letter of St. Paul to Timothy, chapter 2, verse 1 to 8, reminds us that God has created everyone for his own good, for salvation. And as such, we need to pray for these people, beginning with those that have the authority, those that have been entrusted with the care of people, the kings, the leaders. Pray for everyone. Pray that God may touch them. Pray for the grace of God upon them. Sometimes when we pray for those we perceive to be our enemies, to be against us, We always pray for destruction. We pray rather against them rather than for them. But Paul is reminding us that is not the way of the Christian. We should pray for them. It is part and parcel of our responsibility as Christians to pray for them, not to despise them, not to condemn them, whom God has not condemned, but to pity them, and out of compassion and pity, we must pray for them. Ask God to touch them. That notwithstanding, this continues in the gospel today, which can be unsettling. The parable of the dishonest servant. Why did Jesus Christ praise this dishonest servant? At the beginning, we have to understand that this parable is not about morality. It's not about the moral behavior of this servant. There's something Jesus Christ is driving home, and that is the astuteness, the shrewdness of this servant. But also it makes us to understand that the gifts given to us, we are stewards. And then there comes a time to give account of our stewardship, a time of reckoning, when we'll be called to give accounts, because we are not owners of what we have. Whether the merchants in the first reading today or the kings in the second reading that we are required to pray for, we are just servants. We are stewards. And the consciousness of this will determine how we live our lives. If we understand that there comes a time we'll be called to draw account of our stewardship, of our leadership roles, of how we have acquired and helped others with what we have, then it will make us to be compassionate. It will make us to become good stewards, to be faithful servants. And we use what we have been given, the responsibility given to us, for the benefit of others. That is what Jesus is trying to draw home. That this man was shrewd enough to know that he can reduce the debts of these debtors, and they will be able to acknowledge him when eventually he is dismissed from his stewardship. That is the intelligence that Jesus saw. Said, if the people of this world know how to use such intelligence, how to be shrewd in dealing with their own, how much more should we be shrewd, knowing that the time is running short, and then let us use the time we have and what we have for the good of others, to gain eternity. In fact, Jesus drives home this message when he said, you cannot be master, you cannot be servant of money and God. You cannot serve two masters at the same time. Money is good, but money becomes a problem when we become servants of money. God has given us money, that money will be at our own service to use it for the good of others. And then God himself, the giver of money, the giver of wealth, becomes our master. But when we exchange the two, then we are misplacing our priorities. And when we misplace our priorities, that is when we go extra mile to exploit others, because we are no longer seeing God as the giver of what we have to be worshipped, but we are seeing the gift as the be all and end all. And that is where the problem is. Today's readings call us to reflect, to think. The gifts God has given you, it might not be money. It might be your intelligence. It might be your talent. It might be your time. How do we use it for the good of others? How do we use it to gain relationship with God? How do we use it to gain friendship with God? Do we abuse it? Do we cherish it? And when we cherish it, when we appreciate it, then we turn to God who has given it to us and worship Him while using it for the good of others. Remember that what we hoard, what we keep, we lose. But what we give, we gain. That is the paradox of our Christianity. Jesus was rich, but made himself poor for us, for the poor, that eventually they may become rich. Jesus is calling us today to imitate him in his act of self-giving, giving everything, so generous, so compassionate, that he withheld nothing from us. He gave to the extent of giving his life for the good of humanity. Let us be conscious of this, and let us work for justice and the good of everyone we come in contact with.